All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Adirondack Forest Pest Hunters Winter 2023 Training, Surveying for Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. This is the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program's first webinar of 2023, and we're all really excited to be here with you today. My name is Sean Kittle, and I am APIPP's Communications Coordinator, and I'll be kicking things off this morning. Just for those of you who don't know, the Forest Pest Hunters program began in 2021, and in that time, about 35 volunteers have logged more than 550 invasive species reports into IMAP Invasives, which is New York State's online invasive species database. You'll hear more about that later. And whether you are a returning volunteer or a new volunteer, we can't thank you enough for being part of this program. These reports are vital to our understanding of the distribution of the species. All right, today's agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm going to give you a really brief introduction and introduce our speakers to you. Then we're going to get into some information about hemlocks and hemlock woolly adelgid. After that, we'll talk about some HWA scouting protocol. And then Mitch O'Neill is going to get into using IMAP invasives to report invasive species. Becca will take it away with the Forest Pest Hunters program. We'll talk a little bit about some winter hiking safety, since a lot of you will probably be out and about this winter. And then we'll do a Q&A. And we will have time after each section. If you have a burning question and you want to ask one of our speakers, we'll let people kind of jump in and ask some quick questions at the end of each section as well. And then if we want to have like a bigger conversation, we can save that for the end for the Q&A. And we will be recording this. And the reason we do that is because we want people to be able to reference this or access it later. Some people signed up but weren't able to make it today. So this information, this video will all be on our YouTube channel, hopefully within a day. Sometimes it takes a little while to upload on Zoom's end, but we'll get it up as quickly as we can. All right, and today's speakers, first, and this is the order that they'll be speaking in. First, we have Carolyn Marshner, and she's with the New York State Hemlock Initiative, sorry. And then we have Christopher Williams with the Capital Region PRISM. PRISM stands for Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. And then we have Mitch O'Neill with New York Natural Heritage Program, IMAP Invasives Project. And we have our very own Becca Bernacki. She's from APIPP, the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program. And lastly, we have Mary Glynn with the Adirondack Mountain Club. She'll be going over the winter safety recommendations. Okay, and I'm giving control to Carolyn.
Thank you. Let's see if it worked. Thank you guys for coming to help us with hemlock conservation in the Adirondack Park. I work for the New York State Hemlock Initiative at Cornell University. We are mostly focused on biological control and working with our partners to move forward hemlock conservation in New York. Not doing anything.
There we go.
So hemlock trees, you guys probably know a lot about them, but just in case there's some people here who don't know how to identify them from all those other conifers, I'm just going to go over that very quickly. Hemlocks are no longer the third most common tree in New York State. They're now the fourth most common tree, in part because of the mortality that we've had from HWA in the lower parts of the state. They have this lovely bark that is furrowed and a gray-brown and rough. And the foliage is lacy and drooping instead of being like a spruce, where the spruce have the arms that stick straight up. The hemlocks tend to have more of a drooping appearance. The my boss calls them the Labrador puppies of the tree world. They see feathery evergreen with the leading edge often a little bit tipped. The needles are short, flat. They're dark green and shiny on the top, and on the bottom, they have these two white stripes on the underside, and the tips are rounded, and the two white stripes on the rounded tips, I think, are how you differentiate them from taxus, from the yews. They are held opposite each other on the branch in a kind of a two-ranked manner like this, with needles here and needles here, a little bit like an X-wing fighter for those who remember those movies. And there's the white stripes on the underside, which is where their stomata are. Their cones are small, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches long, and rounded scales. They're brown when they're mature, but when they're still growing, they're almost mint green. Hemlocks are what we call a foundation species. You know how wolves are a keystone species. A foundation species is a very abundant species, usually a plant that makes the ecosystem that everything else lives in. So that's why we call it a foundation species, because it sort of builds the ecosystem. They fill a pretty unique niche in our forests. They are our most shade-adapted conifer. Those short little needles are specially adapted to photosynthesize from just the sun flecks that come in through a pretty dense canopy, which is why they sometimes hold their needles lower down to the ground. And it's how the young hemlocks can go ahead and grow and hang on in a thickly forested area until they get a gap, until there's a gap and they have enough light to really grow. And they can hang on in the understory for over 100 years. So those little ones that you see aren't necessarily young. They like to grow in our steep slopes down here in the Finger Lakes. They like to grow in our gorges, but I think they're a little more varied up in the Adirondacks where they grow. But they often grow on north-facing slopes, and they like moist areas, so they're often growing riverside, riparian species. They support a pretty complex food web. They provide either habitat or food for over 400 species. I've heard them called the ever-feeding tree because in the wintertime, as the snowpack builds up, it captures more of those drooping branches and pulls them down so that deer and other animals can get to them to feed on them. In the summertime, when you walk into a hemlock grove, you'll feel how much cooler it is and how quiet. That's because it's got this really dense foliage, and the temperature underneath the hemlock canopy is up to 10 degrees centigrade cooler than the air above the canopy. So it's a good refuge from summer heat. In the wintertime, when you walk in there, you'll find it's warmer because that evergreen foliage again is blocking the wind. So it's good refuge year-round from climate extremes. They also help our aquatic ecosystems. They provide some acidity into the water, and the shade that they produce and the way they hold snowpack into the spring actually helps stabilize stream flows and keep the temperature cool, which is great for cold water fish assemblages like our much beloved trout species. I just said that. Do it again. There's a lot of forest in New York, but up to 76% of it is privately owned. So it's not just in public lands that we need to look for HWA, it is everywhere. What we don't want is for our forests to look like this. This is Pisgah National Forest in the southern Appalachians after hemlock woolly adelgid had gone through, and you can see all those, we call them gray ghost trees that are left after the hemlocks die. And this is the culprit, hemlock woolly adelgid. I'm going to take a step back and show you all the places where hemlocks grow naturally in the world. All of these are places where HWA is native. it's just us over here on the East Coast that our trees did not evolve with this kind of piercing, sucking pest. And our ecosystems don't have any predators to eat them. And so this is where HWA is a problem. In the other areas where hemlock grow, the HWA is a minor pest that doesn't really kill trees. HWA arrived in downstate in the late 80s, and it's been spreading through the Hudson Valley and then into the Catskills. It actually hopped. You can see some other light colors over here. These are separate infestations that were started by nursery trees that were brought up from the mid-Atlantic that were infested and started separate infestations. And then it got up into the Adirondacks. It was first identified in the Adirondacks in 2017. So here's more of a close-in look at the Adirondacks. These are some new points over here. Moving along the lake, these were just identified last year. So HWA is coming in this way from the west. It's also coming up from Saratoga Springs, moving up through the Lake George area. And there's one outlying point here at Rookwood State Park. And all that green is the hard work that professionals and volunteers have been doing for the last several years, looking for HWA all over the Adirondacks. And the greens are negative points. Here's the Lake George infestation up a little more closely. It's now on a couple of these islands, and we do have one point on the west side of the lake now. So what is it about this bug that makes it so bad here? This is what it looks like. What you'll actually see when you look at a tree are these white, waxy, woolly masses that are on the twigs at the base of the needles. They're not on the needles, they're on the twigs. And if you strip away that wool and you put an HWA under a giant microscope, this is what you would see. This is the straw-like mouth parts of HWA. That's what it sticks down into the tree to suck starches out of the tree. And that damages the tree. We're not actually sure how, but we think that what's happening is that the tree is walling off each of these little needle prick wounds. And when you have a bunch of them, it makes it so that all of that scar tissue blocks sap from getting to the end of the twig to make new foliage. And because the tree can't make new foliage, it eventually starves. In the south, it takes about 4 to 10 years to kill a hemlock tree with HWA. Up here, it's more like 6 to 20 years, but with our warmer winters that we've been having, we've been seeing some faster mortality here in the Finger Lakes in the last few years. HWA has it's one of those insects with a super complicated life cycle, but here in the US, where we only have one of its 2 hosts, which is hemlocks, it has 2 generations a year. So we have one generation that the eggs are laid in the early summer, hangs out like it's hibernating. It's called estivating in the summer. And then in the fall, when the temperatures start to drop, it wakes up, grows, and then lays eggs in Marchish. And then there's a second generation that zips right through their life cycle and lays these eggs, these late spring, early summer eggs. 2 generations a year. Overwintering generation, spring generation. This is what they look like when they hatch. These are crawlers. This is the only mobile stage of HWA. So the only time that you can really spread HWA is from when the eggs are laid in Marchish, but then definitely when the crawlers hatch in April through the end of June. The rest of the year, you can walk through HWA stands and feel assured that you're not spreading HWA. The crawlers settle and become estivating nymphs. And this is what they look like in the summer team, these teeny tiny poppy seeds with a little white halo around them. They're not very attractive predators in the summer, and so they estivate over the summer when most of the activity in the woods is happening, so that they're not particularly attractive to be eaten. They are. Then once fall comes, they start growing and making this wool, which is what you can actually see on the tree more easily. And that's why we look in the winter, is because they're much easier to find in the winter. The adults are in there. This is an adult. They lay these eggs, which are right here. They lay 50 to 100 eggs per individual. I'm just going to skip through this. So you've got asexual reproduction. Any individual HWA can lay eggs all by itself. They don't have any need for a mate. They just reproduce asexually. So you have asexual reproduction, which means one individual can start or restart an infestation. 2 generations a year, 2 opportunities for exponential growth. So even if you have a really cold winter and a bunch of them die in the wintertime, they just bounce right back with that spring generation. And there are no native predators here on the East Coast. And that is why we're having these exponential population growth and this HWA spreading all across our landscape and killing our trees. And that is what I have for you, looks like. So thank you. If you want to know more about the work that we're doing, researching a biological control solution for this pest, visit us online. And I'm going to turn you back over to the next speaker.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Chris Williams. I'm with the Capital Region PRISM. We work collaboratively with the Adirondack PRISM up north, APIPP, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about surveying for HWA and some survey tips out in the field. So thank you very much. Sean, can you advance the slide for me, please? Some things that you need to know while conducting your survey. I got a couple of tools up here that are going to be helpful for you folks. In particular, I'm going to start on the right side. What you will find most helpful, one, is having a mobile device to record detects and non-detects. We're going to ask that you upload information into APIPP Invasive Mobile, and there's a lot of features in there that will help you with doing that. Some other things with having a cell phone, of course, for emergency purposes, also for taking additional pictures. Sometimes you can use the camera to zoom up close to get a better view. There's a light on the phone if you need a better look. And also there are apps, even in APIPP Invasive mobile app, you can find the latitude and longitude if you need to record your location. Some other thing, the biggest piece that I find extremely helpful, especially with my eyes as they're getting older, are these jeweler hand lenses. You can find these online for about 12 bucks. It's not a lot. And I recommend if you can purchase one, to get one that's a little bit bigger. They are extremely helpful. Some of them come with lights, etc. But they really let you get a close-up look. And of course, it's nice to have a couple hiking poles for a sturdier footing in those rocky slopes. In addition to that, the ends of the poles can be used to grab some branches from those taller trees if they're not close enough. And last but not least, you're going to want a headlamp. One, it serves a safety purpose if you're late. It can help in those dark areas, but wow, turning on that headlamp during an overcast day, even if it's sunny out, and looking up underneath the trees on the lower branches, it will help you to spot those woolly ovisacs that Carrie was talking about. If you're out in the woods and you bump into one of us, you might see us with a DBH tape, field notes, marking tape, sample bags. And we also sometimes walk out in our properties with tree pruners to help grab branches up top. We don't recommend that you use one of those on public lands, but if you're on your private property, they're really helpful for getting branches that are super high up in some of those competitive hemlock stands. Thank you, Sean. Next slide, please. Some other things to consider, this will be talked about in more detail, but make sure you have the appropriate clothing, gear, footwear, ice trackers if you have them, especially this time of the year. And most importantly, know the area before you go. Make sure you have a map of the area. Some of these locations are really large and very expansive. So take that moment before you're pre-planning for the day and make sure you have all of your safety gear, clothing, and food. And again, this will be expanded on in a little bit more detail. And I typically will use a map. I'll take a map with me as one of my tools. I'll take a look at the trail that I'm going to be on. I'll look at neighboring trails, try to familiarize myself with the names of the trails, their locations, and their mileage, so I can estimate appropriately, where I'm going. I'd like to say on average, it takes a normal person about 22 minutes to walk a mile in the backcountry. So that's another way you can gauge your time. Thank you, Sean. All right, some tips for hunting. Let's get into the nitty-gritty here. Your detection time for non-detects or detects and recording them, late fall to early spring. You'll get from somebody a call out to say, hey, we don't want you surveying anymore because the crawlers are out. And that might be around the April month. So you'll be looking for that. But you really can look for HWA. There's different scales at which you can look at them. Carrie showed you some of the cisterns with the little black looking sesame seed kind of creature with a slight halo of wool coming out of the sides of its abdomen. But as the winter approaches and it gets colder and colder, that woolly mass, that secretion actually increases and it makes it easier to see. So you're going to be looking for the woolly masses like you see on the branch below. Your landscape, hemlocks tend to grow in shaded areas. It is a shade tolerant tree. We typically will find them on the north facing slopes and in the Adirondacks. I mean, they're everywhere. There's a high concentration of hemlocks, especially in that southeast corner in the northern Saratoga, Warren County region. One of the things I do when I'm surveying though, the tree that you will see on the right in the picture there, it has kind of an unhealthy appearance. There are hemlocks surrounding it that have nice green branches and buds, but that one hemlock there is a good indicator that, hey, there might be something going on with the tree, the health of this tree, and that would warrant a closer look. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean I'm going to just look only at unhealthy trees. I check all trees when I can, depending on my variable intermittent schedule of how fast and how many trees I want to look at. But this is an easy way to start, is look for trees that are in poor health. The foliage clues, they'll have weakening, declining crown, there'll be more sunlight coming through. The needles will not have their proper color. They'll be less sparse, and it's just an indicator of poor tree health. Sometimes when I'm walking around these water bodies where we see hemlock woolly adelgid appearing, or streams and tributaries into water bodies, I'll see these unhealthy trees, and then I look at the base of the tree and I see a beaver has done a good number on the base of the tree. So it may not always be hemlock woolly adelgid, but it's an indicator or a clue. The picture on the left shows you really poor crown condition where it's just, the insect has been depleting the reserves of the tree, it's losing its needles, and it's in poor health. Those are ones you can check quickly. Also, it's a good time to look down in the wintertime, even into the late winter, early spring. Sometimes the needles will shed and they'll have the HWA on the actual needles on the ground, and you can pick them up and do an inspection, especially if there's really tall trees in the area where you can't get those lower branches. So again, you're looking for the wool at this point in the winter time. Some other things to consider when surveying, people will ask me like, well, how many branches do I check on a tree? Well, it all depends on how much time you have and what you feel safe and comfortable doing. A professional survey, we might look at 2 to 3 sides of the tree quickly in a timed effort in a specific search area. And then we move on and might go a quarter mile to a half mile and search more trees. But really, we're looking for the detects, non-detects. Do what you can survey, what you're most comfortable with. There's different ways to work this out. But what you need to know is that you're checking the trees, and it's extra eyes and hands on a really large forest preserve that we can't get to all or every piece of that woodlot. Next slide, Sean. All right, So things to train your eyes on. It's hard sometimes when you don't have an obvious infestation. The picture on the left, you can see the cones there. You can see the underside branch. You want to check the ends of the branches, the tips of the branches. And again, you're looking for those white woolly masses at the base of the needle where the creature will insert its stylus, its mouth part, into the base of the needle collar. And you can see that clearly on the picture on the left, but it's still hard to see on a bright sunny day. Take that headlamp. In early detections, we kind of get like the picture on the upper right. You know, I'm looking at that. Wow, it's really hard to see. I see 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 little furry white masses. I'm not really sure what they are, but sometimes that's what you're looking for at the end of the branch towards the tips, is just a couple ovisacs. And again, you want to look nice and close at them. And that's why the hand lens is really helpful. You can see in the bottom right, when you look at the actual ovisacs or a hand lens, they have like a woolly fibrous texture. And that's going to help you kind of confirm your suspicions, because there are some lookalikes that we'll talk about very briefly here. And again, focusing on the woolly masses at the base of the needle, not on the needle, not at the tip of the needle, on the base of the needle where the twig line is. That bottom picture, you can actually see some of the HWA with the surrounding woolly masses. Next slide, please. All right, again, you see the woolly masses, and that's what you're looking for. And this is what I would call a really heavy infestation. You know, I could count anywhere from 20 to 30 ovisacs in the first couple inches of that branch. That's a really heavy infestation on that particular branch. But again, we're looking to see if you can just find 1 or 2 of those and start with that. And quite often, that's how we find them with early detection. Or just 1 or 2 of them on one branch is an indicator that there might be a lot more on another branch or a nearby tree. The other thing about HWA, it doesn't matter where in the tree. You know, we're closer to the ground and that's where you're checking, but it can infest the tree in the middle, on the upper canopy, on the bottom, on one side. It all depends on the environment conditions, wind, you know, what kind of bird activity or mammalian activity is going on and how it spreads. But there's a lot of wind throw that goes on. So just looking is the best you can do. Next slide, please. So again, you're looking at the base of the needles and just emphasizing that. That's where the cistern is. You can see a white halo where it's secreting the woolly mass. As the winter approaches, that wool is going to expand and it's going to get really large. It's there. The picture on the left, a high quality photo. You can see how they're kind of diagonally inserting their body position at the collar of the needle. And that's a real good indicator to help. And that's a takeaway for you. Notice the hemlock with the white stripes underneath. It's the tip of the branch at the end of the branch. Thank you. All right, lookalikes to wrap this up. There's a lot of other things out there that will throw you when you're looking. It's always nice when you're with somebody else in the woods, you can get confirmation like, hey, take a look at this. Do you think this is a woolly mass? And so it kind of helps to actually have, you know, just to question things a little bit. On the upper left, there is a spider egg nest. A couple of things. 1, it's not at the base of the needle. And 2, if you have your hand lens, and sometimes I'll actually have a pair of tweezers for like removing twigs, I will actually tug at the item in question. You know, I don't want to destroy it in case it's the only one that's there to get a good picture. But if I'm not sure, and if I pull it apart a little bit, it might be silky and it's not at the base of the needle, I'm going to probably say that's a spider. So that's one way to look at the difference there. There are spittle bugs on the left. I think a lot of people kind of know them, but they're just another creature that has nothing to do. You can see the bubbly mass that they secrete. There is a hemlock needle miner. Do you see the bug, the actual larvae? You know, they cause the tips of the needles to be brown. HWA does not cause browning of the needle tips. And then on the upper right is scale infestations. You gardeners are probably familiar with scale. There's elongated hemlock scale. You know, it's an invasive creature. There's other types of scale, but those are some lookalikes for you folks. Next slide. And again, there you go. The tip of the branch on the other underside, looking at the base of the needle for any of those ovisacs. And again, when you look at some of those, even from this photograph, you can see it's more of a fibrous material like a wool sweater would be, as opposed to a silky spider egg. And I think that was my last slide. There might be one more. Oh yeah, these guys. Oh, I love these guys. All right, so the balsam adelgid is a lookalike. You should familiarize yourself on how to identify a balsam tree. They have a nice Christmas tree-like smell when you crush the needles. And the needles are a little bit longer, but in terms of trees, it is definitely the one that might throw you for a lookalike up north. It tends to grow at slightly higher elevations, but not always, and it can be intermixed with the hemlock trees, and that also suffers from a balsam adelgid. The key here, you're probably looking at it and like, okay, where is that woolly mass? Is that at the base of the needle, or is it found all over on the needles? And that's an indicator. One, balsam tree, it's not at the base of the needles, not the species we're looking for. They are harmful to balsam trees, and they are similar. The other guy, the woolly aphids. Oh, you will see these. They are so cool. I have seen these in Keene Valley. This creature here will actually secrete a woolly mass. If you disturb the branch, they will actually kind of move a little bit. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism or what that is, but they kind of do this little dance, and it's quite amusing to watch and see and kind of investigate. Again, these kind of sometimes are on deciduous shrubs, and they can be throwing you off, but just something cool to look at. Insects are cool. All right, I do believe that's it for me. And there's a little summary slide I forgot, my apologies. So when you stop and scout and you hike across a group of hemlocks, check the branches that are reachable from the trail. Some of them won't have low branches. You can move on, you can use your hiking pole. You know, if you come across a pretty big stand of hemlocks, you might want to spend a little bit more time in that area. You know, check for multiple branches on the bottom of the tree from the trail that are reachable from the trail. If you're in an area and it's been about 10 minutes and you've looked at like 10, 15 trees, it's okay to move on, continue hiking and enjoy the day. If it's really densely populated with hemlock, stop every 10 to 15 minutes. I know some people like to use different fitness trackers. You can do it by mileage or time, but find a comfortable pace that you're, you know, keeping warm. This is a cold activity. So keep moving along and keep doing your thing and just kind of be in intervals. There's no right or wrong way. Again, we need the extra eyes on the ground, boots on the ground. All right, thank you, Sean. Oh, and last but not least, make sure you enter any detections and non-detections in APIPP invasive. So now I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you. I'm Mitch O'Neill, and I'm up next. Just give me a second to, okay, yes, I have control now. Here we go. So my name is Mitch O'Neill. I work with the New York Natural Heritage Program with the APIPP Invasives team. So I'm going to talk to you all about getting set up with APIPP Invasives and using that to report your sightings so that our friends at the Hemlock Initiative and APIPP can all see your records and keep track of the distribution with your help. So for those of you who haven't heard of IMAP, it's the centralized invasive species database to support PRISM, state agencies, and other partners working on invasive species issues. And one thing about IMAP that I think is pretty cool is the wide variety of people that use it. So everyone from general public who encounter something in their backyard to community scientists and volunteers like a lot of you, to PRISM staff and state agency workers. It's used by a really large group of people. So basically what I'll talk about today is how to create an account and get set up with a mobile app, and then go ahead and start reporting your observations out in the field. And I might go through things somewhat fast. Sorry, I'm in a room with a motion sensor, so my camera might go black every once in a while. But this, if you get lost, you can always ask questions in the chat box, and this information won't go away once I'm done talking. So it's recorded, and there's information on our website. I think you even got instructions in the Zoom registration. So you should be able to figure out what you need to figure out after my talk as well. And if you need help, you can always reach out. So the first thing to do to use IMAP is to create an account, and accounts are free. You can go to nyimappinvasives.org and click the login button to create an account. But there's also other stuff you can look at on our website, like help resources, events going on, stuff like that. But to log in, just click that button in the corner, and it'll bring you to our account login page. If you already have an account, you can enter your email and password up at the top. If you're having trouble getting in, you can use the forgot password option. But if you don't have an account, you can use the sign up box underneath. So put in your information, your name, the email you want to use, and create a password, and then click join. And at that point, you will get a activation email to your inbox, so make sure you check for that. Sometimes people don't see it and it ends up in their spam box. So if you don't see it, check for it there. Basically, you just need to follow a link to accept the user agreement, and then your account is active. So one thing that happens sometimes is people just cannot log into their account. Like maybe they created one a year ago and now they can't log in. Maybe they created one 2 weeks ago and they forgot to activate it. So if you get into that kind of issue where you just can't get into your account, you can email us, and our email will be listed at the end. So we can always sort out those issues. But hopefully you create your account and you log in with no issues. That's what happens most of the time. So when you log in, you're brought into our online interface, and it looks like that. And there's a whole lot of functionality in here. You don't necessarily need to use it for participating in this HWA mapping project. You can do most of that in the mobile app. But just so people are aware, there's a lot of stuff to explore on the online interface if you're interested. So just to orient you a little bit, there's the main menu at the top left, navigation tools, action tools at the top, like filtering on a species you're interested in, and then geographic layers to turn on and off. So for example, you could view a map of where HWA is in New York right now, some other species you're interested in too, but all just for your interest, not necessarily required for this volunteer program. One thing in the online interface that we are encouraging volunteers to do is join the APIPP Volunteer Forest Pest Monitoring Project. This just kind of groups all the efforts in this program together. So we can filter on the project, we can report on the project, that sort of stuff. It just kind of brings everyone together who's working together on this project. And so the way that you do that is you go to the main menu and navigate to the projects. And then once you're on the projects page, you find the APIPP project. And so the easiest way to do that is to start typing APIPP Volunteer F, and then APIPP Volunteer Forest Pest Monitoring comes up. And that project name is also in that Zoom registration email you got if you misplaced that. So you click on that project, and then you're brought to the project page, and there's a request to join button at the top. So main menu, projects, find the APIPP Volunteer Forest Pest Monitoring Project, and then request to join project. And so that was all I was going to cover on the web interface. So now I'll move into the mobile app. So just to clarify, the web interface, what I just showed kind of has all this functionality. You can create records, points, lines, polygons, presence not detected, look at the data, look at maps. But of course, it requires connectivity, so it's a website. So a lot of good uses for that, but probably not the most useful for going out on a trail in the Adirondacks and searching for HWA. So for that kind of thing, we've created the mobile app. So this is designed for quick data collection, point records only, quick presence and not detected records, and it does not require connectivity once you've configured it. So if you get it all set up before you go out on your hike, you can then report you can then record observations even if you have no internet service, and then just upload those when you get back home, all within the mobile app. And all of the data from the mobile app goes into the same place as the web interface. Email alerts are triggered. So if you report something on your phone, Carolyn and Becca will have an email alert about it the next day to really keep everyone up to date. And so I'll talk about the mobile app now. If anyone doesn't have it on your phone, please feel free to search it in your app store right now. You feel free to follow along. You can also just watch now and follow along with the recording later if that's easier for you. So just search IMAP Invasive and download that. And well, I'll give people a second to do that if anyone has to do that right now. And I'll just make a side point that good photos are really important. So later I'll show, in a couple minutes, I'll show actually recording an observation in IMAP, and one piece of that is taking a photo. And this photo is super, super important. So this is the photo that people like Carolyn and Becca are going to see when they're looking at your reports, trying to figure out if it's indeed HWA or maybe it's a spider egg mass or something. So that picture is really important. So on the left, these photos are a little bit blurry. I think they are HWA. But it's a little bit hard to tell. You kind of have to squint, and especially on the bottom one, there's only one tiny little white thing that could be HWA, so you can't really tell. So what we really need are these clear photos. Like this volunteer, they put their hands behind it to help the camera focus. They have really great lighting. I know you can't always control lighting. We just kind of ask people to do the best you can. Get as clear of a picture as you can so that experts can really zoom in and see the suspected egg mass. One other side point is we understand it's hard to tell. So we don't expect everyone to perfectly get the distinction between HWA versus egg mass versus spider egg masses. But if you take a clear picture, that lets the experts make that distinction for you. All right, so now I'll do a quick run through of the mobile app workflow. So it's basically a three-step process. You set up your account, and that requires connectivity. You kind of have to connect your account, you set up your account and the app. So you kind of have to connect your app to your online account. Do that while you have connectivity. For instance, you could follow along now and do that, or you could do that before you go out on your hike. But you just have to do that first step while you have internet. Once you've completed that, you can go on to record observations out in the field, and then just make sure you upload those when you get back home. And I'll show more of that later. That first step, you really only have to do that part once, and then you just kind of cycle between step 2 and step 3. You go out and do your observations, and then you upload them when you get home, and then you go out and do your observations again, and so on and so on. So I'll talk about mobile app setup. So if you open up the app for the first time, you should be automatically brought to a preferences screen. If you don't see that and you go straight to the IMAP home screen, that probably just means you've opened the app before. So what you have to do is just get back to the preferences. So you click the menu at the top and then select preferences from the menu. And then you would all be here on this preferences page. So the most important thing is really just filling out these first 3 things and then clicking retrieve IMAP lists. So you put in New York for your state, for the species list you want to use because you're reporting in New York. And then you put in your username, which is just the email address you use to sign up, and your password. And then you click retrieve IMAP lists. And if you get the good green success message, you're pretty much ready to go. That's really the main thing you need to do to set up your app, and you're ready to go and record observations. If you get some other message, like the red error message, usually it means there's some issue with your username and password. So maybe it doesn't match what you used to sign up, so try retyping it. Sometimes iPhones add a space after your password because they think you're writing a sentence or something. So one thing I'd suggest is to go back online to the website and see if you can log in. Try to resolve your issues there, maybe change your password if you have to, or email us if you're having some sort of account issue. But where we really want to get everyone is you have your active IMAP account, and you put in your credentials in the app and retrieve IMAP lists, and then you're ready to go. And again, I'll remind people to, one thing that's often forgotten is activating your account. So if you're here and you're getting a message that your password's not working, maybe it's just that your account isn't active yet. So go back into your email and follow that activation link. There are some more preferences under that Retrieve IMAP List button. I won't go into those now, but there are some useful things like you could you could customize a species list and put in just a couple of species that you're interested in, like hemlock lily adelgid and a fake species, which is a species we have set up for people to test. So you can always put in fake species records as much as you want to just kind of get used to the app. And so that'll just make it so that when you're reporting later, you'll have a very short species list of just the species you're interested in. But in general, the rest of the defaults are fine, so I won't go into those now. And if you do change anything, make sure to always click the Save button at the bottom left. One more preference I will mention, that forest pest monitoring project. You can set that as your default project. So you can either set it as your default and then it'll just automatically be on all your records, or in each of your records, you can select that project. So that's just kind of personal preference. And if you're having a problem with that, we recommend making sure you've joined that project. So this group does not have to join any organization, so it's just the project. And if you have, then maybe try tapping the Retrieve IMAP List button in the app again, and it should pop up. All right, so that's setting up an account. Next is actually recording your observations. And so again, for this part, you don't actually need connectivity. So you can do it while you have internet, like if you want to practice at home before you go out, but you can also do it out in the field with no internet. And if anyone wants to follow along right now, you can submit a fake species record as a test. So you click that Add Observation button at the top. And the first thing you're asked to do is take a photo. So again, that's super important. You can either take a photo with the camera or select a photo from the library. And depending on your settings, if you select a photo from the library, IMAP will grab the geographic coordinates associated with your phone when you took that photo. You can toggle on or off your custom species list. You select the species, so in this case, select fake species. And then really important is selecting detected or not detected, so whether or not you found the species. And under that, you'll see a map with your location. And sometimes the map won't show up. For instance, if you don't have if you don't have good connectivity, sometimes it'll just be gray. So really, the most important thing to look at is your latitude and longitude. So if it says 0, 0, it's probably not working. But if you have a nice long number with a lot of numbers after the decimal point, that means your GPS location is being successfully captured. If you have 0, 0, it might be because of the permissions on your phone. You might have to fix that. And that kind of depends on your individual device. And then so that's really the most important information to capture. But below that, there are some additional things. So you want to make sure you have your project selected, the APIPP Volunteer Forest Pest Monitoring Project. And you can also enter your time searched. So that's really helpful for APIPP to kind of keep track of all the wonderful efforts that volunteers are undertaking. And then if you have any comments like the number of trees that were infected or something like that, you can put that there. And always save any changes you make. So that's how you record an observation. And then the last step is uploading to IMAP. So once you've created observations, they'll show up as these yellow cards on your home screen. And that means you've recorded the observation and it's sitting on your phone. So that's really good, but people like Carolyn and Becca, they cannot see it. So what you really want to do is make sure this gets onto the map for everyone who needs to see it to be able to see it. So you have the option of, you could click that pencil button if you want to make a quick change. So like it does give you a quick summary of the species and whether it was detected or not. And if something looks off to you, you can always click the edit button and fix that. But usually the record's probably all set. So you would click the checkbox here and then go to the menu and select Upload Selected. And it will ask you if you're sure, and if you are, you click OK. And it will load for a minute, and then you should be left with any records you checked off should go away. And so we recommend, if you're out there recording a lot of records, we often recommend like batches of 25, just so it doesn't take forever to load. But generally, there aren't many problems at this step. But I will just re-emphasize, if you have a yellow card on your phone, that means you have a record that's kind of sitting on your phone, waiting to go into IMAP. So at the end of a day, you might see like a long list of yellow records, and that's great. But your job isn't completely done until you see a blank green screen. So you really want to make sure you get all of your records off of your phone and into the online database. They don't actually disappear. They're just in IMAP now. And you can log in online to go look at them. One last tip I wanted to share. So one thing that often comes up is, and something just popped up in the chat about this, I think, is how many records do you record? So that's a good question. So I'll first go with not detected. So say you are going to your trail, you check at the trailhead, you check hemlocks along the way, you do an hour-long hike out and back, but you don't see any hemlock lily adelgid. Should you be dropping a point at every single tree you check? No, you don't have to do that. So that would take a lot of time. So we don't really need that level of detail for this sort of thing. So what we recommend is just kind of try to get a record of your survey as a whole. So one way to do that would be, if you're going on your trail, drop one not detected on the first hemlock you see, and then one more as far out as you go. And then that kind of shows us you've traveled, you kind of surveyed this general area and there was no HWA there. So about 2 records per site that you visit. For presence, it's a little different. If you are going on your trail and maybe you run into like 10 or so individual trees that do have HWA, you can kind of report those as you come across them. But if you are in an area where you're finding stands, like collections of 5 to 20 trees, and all of them are infested, or a lot of them are, we really don't need you to record a point for every single one of those trees. 1 point for the stand would be sufficient, and you could put more information in the comments, like 20 trees, all infested, or something like that. And then my one last point is, I just wanted to mention that we're doing the HWA Winter Mapping Challenge again this year. Our first year was last year, and I think several Adirondack volunteers were in the running. We had really great participation last year, and so that's back for this year. So we really encourage you to get out and submit some reports from February through March 15th to be in the running for a fun prize from the Hemlock Initiative. And with that, there's some links up there in my contact information, but I'll pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
So we've learned a lot so far. We've heard from Kara and we've learned what HWA is and how to identify it, as well as how to identify hemlocks. And Sean, do you mind going to the next slide for me as we chat through some of this? And then we heard from Chris about how we go and we do our surveys. And we've heard from Mitch about how to download the app and get all that information on our phones. So the next step is really how do we know where to survey? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about a bit today. And then last but not least, after I'm done talking with you folks, we have our partner Mary over at ADK who's going to talk about some trail safety. So Sean, if you want to go to the next slide. So where can we survey? So you may have a parcel, your backyard, you may have a cabin or a cottage up here, and you want to go out and survey that for hemlock woolly adelgid, and that's fantastic. Please, please do that. So you can sign up for, you can go survey your backyard, you can go survey your favorite trail that you take the kids and grandkids to, you know, when they come up and you go hiking, and those are all great places to survey. If you are out surveying those areas, though, please enter those detection and non-detection records into IMAP. Those non-detection records are just as important to us because we know someone's been in that area and looked and they didn't find it. If you don't have a place in mind where you want to survey, we do have this really great trail adoption map, which I'm going to walk through in a minute. And these are trails that should have hemlocks along them. We overlaid some trail layers with some hemlock layers so that we found areas that did have hemlocks. And they're all going to be kind of centralized in that lower southeast portion of the Adirondacks, where there's a higher potential for hemlock woolly adelgid to be found. So I'm just going to take control and share my screen here for a second. So if you bear with us. Sean, can you verify you're seeing the splash screen? Sean, are you sharing that splash screen?
Yep, I'm seeing it.
Perfect. So I'm going to send out a link today after the recording is rendered. And this email I'm going to send you is going to have all the information that folks talked about today. It's going to have the protocol I'm going to talk about in a second. It's going to have this link to this map. When you get to our sign up map, you're going to see this splash page, giving you a little bit of background about the program, offering some winter safety hiking tips. And it does say that our program does run through April 9th. Now, if you were zooming through the chat, you will see that Carrie did mention that sometimes these guys emerge into their crawler phase a bit earlier than we expect if it's a milder winter. So please stay tuned to those emails just in case we need to cut the program a little bit early this year. So our program is going to run from right now up until about April 9th, unless we do need to cut it earlier. You'll also see logos for all of our great partners, some of those folks you've heard from today. And at the end of the program, we're going to talk about some great field trips where you can get out on the ground with myself or my colleague Zach Simic and some of our partners. We're going to actually go do surveys and we can walk you through using the app at that time. So you can go ahead and click OK. And you'll see this map here with a whole bunch of orange and green dots. So orange dots are trailheads that are available for adoption, where a green dot means it has been adopted. So we've actually had one trail adopted early so far. And if we zoom in, which we can do either by using our scroll wheel on our mouse, or these plus and minus buttons, you'll see that trails start to pop up. And these are New York State DEC trails. They can be cross-country ski trails. They can be mountain bike trails. You can use that legend on the left. And sometimes a trail has multiple trail types. So if I click on this trail here, I can see it's a mountain bike trail, a cross-country ski trail, and also a public trail. Before we get a little bit further into this map, it does have a search feature. So maybe you're not from the region, but you're going to be coming up to Lake Placid. You could search Lake Placid, it would zoom you there and you could kind of see what's in the area. You can also change our base maps. So I'm going to leave it at this kind of topo-y base map for now, but we can also change it to an imagery background if we wish. So what you can do is you can zoom to an area of interest and you'll see a trailhead associated with some trails. Now I'm choosing to come up here because there's something special about some of these trails up in this area. You'll see that there's not trails associated with them. And that's because these are trails that these trailheads are associated with trails for our partners at the Champlain Area Trail System. And when you click on each of those, it will say CATS, which is the Champlain Area Trail Systems acronym. And if you do want to learn more about their trails before you sign up, I'd highly encourage you to visit their website, champlaiнаreatrails.com. They do have great trail maps for you to download for each of those trails. So I'm going to walk through signing up for one of these trails. I'm going to sign up for the Black Kettle Trail. So when I click on that trailhead to sign up for it, I'm going to see this little card pop up. It's going to tell me what the trail is or what the trailhead name is. It's going to give me a sign up now option. and it's going to give me an option to view the approximate location in Google Maps. So if I clicked on that, it would take me to Google Maps. I could get see what the map looks like. I could get directions from my house and that sort of thing. It's a great thing to know these trails before you go out and survey them. You know, even if I were to sign up for one of these DEC trails, I'd probably do a little bit of Googling, look on All Trails or DEC's website to learn a little bit about that trail before I signed up. To sign up, all I have to do is click this Sign Up Now button. The form's going to load in a second. The site name will be automatically generated. The registration date is going to be the date you register. Then you will enter your full name, the email address that you used for IMAP, and then your IMAP person ID number. So I know mine is 19774. But if you don't know yours, there's this great little link here. You can click on it and it'll show you how to find that based on your IMAP account. You can leave any notes or comments. So HWA is bad and we don't like it, so we want to survey for it so we know where it is. And then there is going to be a disclaimer and liability waiver that I encourage you to read through and acknowledge and accept. Then you can hit the submit button and you're signed up for your trial. So if I hit return to the map, we get back to our map and we can see that that dot has turned green and we have signed up for that map. Before we head on to the next section, I just want to make you aware of two more things. The first is if you click at the top, if you look at the top of the map, you'll see our survey protocol is linked here. You can click that and it will download for you. The survey protocol is fantastic. I'm going to send out a PDF of this with that follow-up email, and it goes over everything that we have talked about today, starting with what you need to do your surveys, how to set up that IMAP account that Mitch just talked to you about, how to sign up for a trial, like we just talked about now, how to do your surveys. So as Chris talked about, you know, we get to the trailhead, we kind of survey along the trail, you know, we find a hemlock stand, maybe we survey it for 10 or so minutes, then I move on until we find the next stand. Tells us how to enter that information into IMAP. So remember, those non-detects are just as important as detections. So if you're surveying along an entire trail, you may want to drop a point at the trailhead as well as far as you go. You know, some of those trails, if we look back, are kind of windy, right? Like if we look right here, you know, we could park here and there are multiple trail options. If you drop kind of as far as you go on the trail, then I know what area of that trail complex has been surveyed for hemlock woolly adelgid, and that's really useful information for us. Tells you how to upload your record, and it has some great pictures of what a hemlock looks like as well as what hemlock woolly adelgid looks like. So I like to download this protocol on my phone so I have it for offline use, and then if I ever have any questions, I can open it up in the field and it walks me through all these things. You can also print it and throw it in your backpack. It's also really handy. And we also have some winter hiking tips and tricks here for you to refer to as you're on your way. The last thing I do want to mention is the IMAP Invasive's website is linked here as well. So if you haven't had a chance to sign up for your account yet and you want to sign up for a trial, the link to IMAP's right there for you to do it. I think that's really all I have for you folks today. So I am going to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Got to figure out where it went. There we go. And then Sean can bring back up the PowerPoint and we can pass things off to Mary over at ADK to talk about some winter hiking safety.
Okay. We should be there. Yep, there we go. Mary, do you want to take control of my screen or do you want me to do the slides for you?
We're not seeing your screen yet, Sean.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, my apologies. Okay, there we go. 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let's see. I'll request control.
Okay, got it. There you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about winter hiking and some safety tips for while we're out there checking for hemlock woolly adelgid in the wintertime. Just some ways that we can keep ourselves safe. See, there we go. Okay, so a few considerations for your winter outing to make. Make sure that you're checking the weather for the day that you're heading out to survey, as well as what the weather has been the past few days. Things like big snowstorms, thaw and freeze cycles, freezing rain can all make the trails extra hazardous this time of year. So just having a good idea on not only the weather you'll encounter during your trip, but also kind of what the conditions might look like based on the previous day's weather, as well as checking for the sunrise and sunset times, making sure that you're giving yourself ample daylight to not only get out there and survey, but also safely arrive home or back to your vehicle before dark. Surveying wouldn't be too productive after dark, and making sure you have a headlamp with you to be able to hike out in the dark if needed. Choosing a trail that matches your experience and fitness level is also important. So if you're bringing, kids with you, or, it's kind of your first hike in a while, choosing something that's familiar to you and short will be helpful. You don't need to, go out on a 20-mile survey. Start with something small, close to home, and you'll have a better experience that way. And then also checking the rules and regulations of the area you're going to. One important regulation is making sure that you have snowshoes or skis on when there is 8 inches or more of snow off trail. Sometimes the trails can get packed down, but it's more tiring for us and leaves these big holes in the snow called post holes when we don't wear our snowshoes. So it'll make your trip easier to get around, especially as you're going off trail to likely survey some of the hemlocks. You'll want those snowshoes or skis to give you that flotation above the snow and make things easier for you. So here's a list of the 10 essential gear items to bring on every trip in the outdoors. This is something that, bring what you have. I don't want this to be prohibitive and stop you from surveying, but just keep in mind that, if you're going to be out there for a while, you will want to acquire these things over time. So the first is going to be navigation. We recommend a paper map as well as a compass. A lot of folks are using their cell phones. That's great too, because that is a way it's very accessible. There's a lot of free maps you can download and apps you can use. However, in the wintertime, our phones die quicker. They run out of battery. So just be aware of that. So having a paper map never goes out of style and won't have a dead battery at the end of your trip. The next, sun protection. Having sunglasses on, this way the light in the wintertime can bounce off the snow can really damage our eyes. So sunglasses or even some ski goggles will help protect your eyes. Insulation, of course, is important. Having extra layers, lots of different layers with you will help keep you warm. I find that a lot of my gear will just get wet over time. Things like my mittens and gloves reaching for branches can get covered in snow and a little damp. So having some extra pairs of gloves can be handy. Illumination, I already spoke to, having a headlamp with you. First aid supplies, this can be kind of as much or as little as you think you might need, depending on the size of your group, as well as how long you'll be out there. But having something for blisters and some Band-Aids can be really helpful. Next, fire starting equipment. In case you ran into a really, serious situation and needed to start a fire, having a lighter or some waterproof candles or waterproof matches can be helpful. And then a repair kit, enough things to get you through in case you have an issue with your snowshoe or a microspike, things like zip ties, a small knife, some duct tape, to just be able to patch some things together until you get out of the woods. Of course, nutrition, packing some extra snacks while you're out there, as well as extra water, or in the winter, I like to bring a thermos full of tea or hot chocolate, and then an emergency shelter of some sort too. So this could be a tent, an emergency blanket. They make these really small, lightweight emergency blankets that you can wrap around yourself if you were to get injured on the trail and have to stay warm until help is able to arrive. And then if you are doing some longer winter hikes, there are some extra considerations. If you're going out for an hour or two, you should be fine with the pretty basic 10 essentials list. But if you're going out for a longer time where help might be hours away, you might want to bring a sleeping bag or sleeping pad with you just to be able to keep yourself warm while, if you're calling on the rangers to come help you. A stove is nice in either an emergency situation or also just to make a hot drink on the trail and make the day a little more enjoyable. Hand warmers are lovely to bring with you, and they also do a really great job of warming us up if we do get to be pretty chilly. Putting them against your neck or in your armpits really helps warm your whole body up, so they become helpful for the whole body and not just your hands sitting in your mittens. Of course, you'll want a traction device of some sort, so whether that is microspikes or snowshoes or even skis, depending on the snow depth and the snow conditions and your preferred way of recreating in the outdoors. And then also not hiking alone, especially if this is going to be a longer trip. Bring someone with you, or at the very least, give a very detailed itinerary to someone who cares about you to leave at home, so that way if you don't turn up after the time that you've agreed upon to be back, they can alert the authorities that you are missing. And then my final slide here is just a quick note about frostbite and hypothermia, just some ways to prevent them, as well as just keep your eyes ready for any symptoms. So frostbite, we can prevent this by covering our skin as much of it as possible. In the wintertime, we're probably going to be wearing pants and a jacket, and then hopefully wearing gloves. And if it's a really, really cold day and there's a very cold wind chill, maybe not the best day to go survey, but if you are still going to get out there, having the ability to cover all of your skin. So maybe a scarf or a balaclava, a hat, and ski goggles can help cover up all of the skin on your face. And then, checking in with your own fingers and toes, as well as the people that are with you, making sure everyone can still feel them and that they're not becoming cold, pale, or waxy. And if you see any of these symptoms, start heading back to the car, get yourself warm. If things are not warming up shortly after and you suspect you might have severe frostbite, definitely get that checked out at a medical facility. Frostbite is not something to really treat at home when it becomes severe. And then hypothermia, we want to prevent this by staying hydrated, eating, and staying warm all day, making sure that we're not exerting ourselves too hard where we're sweating through our clothes. We want to try our best to stay warm and dry throughout our trip. And then monitoring yourself and others for shivering, cool skin, loss of dexterity too. So if people are struggling with their zippers or buckling their backpack, anything like that, we really want to stay on top of that and making sure everyone is able to speak clearly still. If they start to stumble or mumble, there's cause for concern. And if you do have someone who is getting quite chilly, bundle them up, get them into some dry layers, have them eat some snacks, sip on a hot drink. Insulate them from the ground and the elements. This is where that sleeping bag and sleeping pad would come in to play, and then use those hand warmers to help warm them up as well. And certainly reach out if you needed help from the rangers, if someone was, becoming very ill with this. But normally if you catch it early, if you know what you're looking for, someone is shivering or just getting a little loss of their dexterity, warm them up, give them a snack, give them a hot drink, keep them moving, and they should be all right. So I think that is all I've got, but I hope you all have fun while you're out there surveying, and keep in mind those safety trips as well. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary. Okay, and real quick, I wanted to just touch on some upcoming events and field trainings that we have. And before I do that, one quick note, if you remember back to Mitch's slides, he mentioned taking clear photos, and he gave a great trick for doing that, of putting like a piece of white paper behind what you're photographing. And that essentially creates contrast. And another thing you can do, especially if you're in a hemlock stand, it's going to be kind of shady in there, even on a bright, clear summer day or a clear winter day, it can be quite shady under hemlock trees. And a lot of blurry photos are a result of your camera trying to let enough light in to get a clear shot. And it does that by keeping the shutter open for a little bit longer to let more light in, and any motion on your part, whether it's your hand or you're breathing hard, can cause it to be blurry. So one thing you can do to help your camera out is to actually use your headlamp. Like even during the day, if you take your headlamp, put it on and just shine it directly on whatever you're taking a photo of, maybe the hemlock branches, for example, and then take a photo there, that might help it. It's kind of, you're basically making a flash, like you're giving it enough light so it doesn't have to keep that shutter open longer. So just a little tip for taking photos of something close up, like a little hemlock twig. And speaking of hemlocks, we have some upcoming HWA survey field trainings. So if you want to get out in the field and learn a little bit more with some people who can kind of guide you along, then these are a great option. Our first one begins at the Owen Pond Trailhead in Wilmington, New York, and that's on Thursday, February 16th from 10 to noon. And that is co-sponsored by APIPP and the Ausable River Association. And then for option 2, we have the Black Kettle Trail in Willsboro, New York, and that'll be on Saturday, March 4th from 10 to noon. And that's co-sponsored by APIPP and Champlain Area Trails, also known as CATS. And then option 3 is going to be at Hearthstone Point Campground in Lake George. That's Saturday, March 11th from 10 to noon. And that's co-sponsored by APIPP, the Lake George Land Conservancy, and the Adirondack Mountain Club. And all of these events are online, and they're also on our Facebook page. If you go to the events section of our Facebook page, so you can see them there. And you can, if you go to adkinvasives.com/events, you can register for these events as well. And I think some of them are limited, if I'm not mistaken, for how many people can join. So if you're interested, you might want to try to register sooner rather than later. All right, we also have a couple really exciting events coming up too. We have two of our annual partner meetings. So we have our Midwinter Aquatic Partner Meeting. That's going to be on Wednesday, February 8th from 10 to 11:30. And then we have our Midwinter Terrestrial Partner Meeting, which is Thursday, February 9th from 10 to 11:30. And then this one is new for APIPP. It's Climate Change and Invasive Species, a conversation with Kurt Stager and Brian Green. Some of you might be aware that Kurt Stager recently co-authored a paper on ice in the Adirondacks and the implications of climate change, and kind of related to ice and his observations, and then on climate change. So we're going to have a really cool conversation with Kurt. He's going to talk a little bit about what sort of inspired this paper that he helped work on, and then he's going to get into the implications of just a warming climate and how that might cause people to basically become climate refugees and move from areas that are going to be hotter and drier to areas like the Adirondacks, which incidentally are forecast to become more favorable, not quite as hot, and we have a lot of water, our winters are getting shorter, that sort of thing. And then Brian Green's going to help us tie that together with what that means for invasive species. As we all know, invasive species tend to move with people. So there's that, but a warming climate in the Adirondacks could also create some more favorable conditions for invasive species. So I think this will be a really fascinating discussion. Those guys are going to talk for a bit, then we're going to open it up to the floor and people can ask questions and kind of engage with them that way. And that'll be Wednesday, February 15th from 10 to 11, and that'll be on Zoom. And you can register for that and all of these at adkinvasives.com/events. So does anyone have any questions? And we might have a couple in the chat here, I can check.
Yeah, so I've been answering questions in chat, and one question that came up that's probably really important to hit on again, is the sign-up map. The sign-up map is just a tool. If you want to survey in an area that's a little higher priority around the Lake George area, and you want to be sure that there's a hemlock on the trail that you're going to survey, please use the sign-up map. It's a great tool. But if you want to go survey your backyard, if your favorite trail has some hemlocks on it, but it's outside of that region, please enter the data as well and survey those as a part of this volunteer process. Those reports are just as important to us. The sign-up map is just another tool to help us all get there together. Also, if you're outside of our region, if you live in Western New York or the Finger Lakes region, and you're tuning in today to learn a little bit more about hemlock woolly adelgid, please also upload those reports to IMAP. You're outside of our region, so I won't be looking at them, but the PRISM staff in your region will be looking at those, as well as, the folks at the Hemlock Initiative and your local PRISM. So the reports are equally as important. Scott also brought up, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
I think I was going to say the same thing you were about to say. Oh, yes, Scott, the March 4th is not open for registration. Yes, it will be open soon, and I should have your email through your sign up to this webinar. So what I can do is send you the registration link once that's up. I'm hoping it'll be up in the next few days.
And I just got a message from Tamara as well as Sue. It looks like the 2023 sign up map is not on our website yet. We're linking to the 2022 map. So we will get that cleared up, and the link I'll be sending with a follow-up email either today or tomorrow. As soon as this recording's rendered and up on YouTube, we'll have the link to the correct map. And I did just see that Carrie raised her hand. So Carrie.
Somebody in the chat asked a good question about how often do you take a negative point? Did we answer that already?
We have not. I think Chris talked a little bit about that as part of his chat just after that came in. And what's really important here, and others can correct me if they disagree, is if you're in a stand of trees, whether it's a detection or not detection, you don't need to enter a point for every tree in that stand. Just enter 1 point, whether it be a non-detect or a detect. If you're hiking along and you're doing your surveys every 10 or so minutes as you come to a new stand, you can feel free to enter 1 point at the very beginning and the very end of that if they're all non-detects. We don't need one at every point you surveyed for those non-detects. We can make the assumption that it was surveyed along that whole length. If you are finding detects along that whole length, you can enter one at every stand, every 10 or so minutes along the trail, but we do not need one for every tree.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to clarify a confusing note I'd put into the chat. Once you submit your record to IMAP, it's verified by somebody, and we cannot verify them without a photo where we can really clearly identify the HWA. Thank you.
Yeah, and another thing to remember too, and Mitch hit on this in his PowerPoint, is when you're out and collecting it, that data is not coming to us directly. You're offline at that point. You do need to upload those records when you get home or back to the restaurant, wherever you're ending your hike. Folks do forget, and I do send a reminder at the end of the survey season as we kind of wrap things up. Look for those yellow cards, and if you have those yellow cards, be sure to send those to us as we close out the program for the year. I do see a question from Julia that says, what is the primary way HWA spreads? Does that spread correlate with disturbance of an area like with invasive plants? Carrie, do you want to tackle that question?
Sure. We think that HWA is spread naturally through movement by wildlife, probably birds. The crawlers are very small, and they could certainly crawl onto a bird's feet and be transmitted to a new location. We hypothesize that this is how they're getting, how they're doing the long distance dispersals that we see that aren't by people. But a lot of the dispersal is done by people moving. Some dispersal is done, long distance dispersal is done by people moving nursery stock that's infested. We actually, the Department of Ag and Markets did catch a few years ago, they did catch HWA in a bunch of nurseries, and they wound up going to all the people who had bought from that nursery, all of the commercial businesses that had bought from that nursery, and destroying all of that stock. So it's a good idea to check any hemlocks that you're purchasing for planting and make sure they don't have HWA. Another way that they're spread, we think, is by the wind. They're so small that they probably get blown through the stands. That's all I've got.
Well, Carrie, isn't it true too that humans can actually move some of those when hemlock woolly adelgid are in the crawly stage? We don't have a lot of documented incidents of that, but that's why we ask folks to stop surveying in the middle of April, because there is that period between mid-April and mid-July where it's possible that we could be inadvertently moving around hemlock woolly adelgid as we're out there touching all the needles and trying to inspect trees. There's also a recommendation that anyone who's having a logging operation done at that time of year, particularly where there is a known infestation, that all the logging equipment get clean and that no live branches get transported off the site.
Thank you. That's absolutely true. And the crawlers are so small, I'm not sure we could see them with the naked eye. So, you know, it's definitely something that it would be hard to know you were doing it if you were moving them around. And if you're cutting hemlock, it might be a good idea to do it at a different time of year than those 2 or 3 months in the spring, if it's possible.
Our next question comes from Jim, and he asks if a photo is necessary for non-detection. And I would say no. You know, you don't need to go take a photo to prove that there's not HWA on that branch. We can trust your judgment on that. I also got a question from Nancy, and she asked what the current controls for hemlock woolly adelgid are. There's really 2 ways that we're going about controlling for this species. So myself and other certified pesticide applicators, folks that have the appropriate licenses, are actually going and spraying trees with insecticides that will kill the hemlock woolly adelgid on those trees. And those products that we spray on the tree are absorbed through the tree and translocated through it, so that when the hemlock woolly adelgid feeds on it, it kills those insects. And that's, you know, it's those insecticides can last up to 7 years, but it's not a permanent solution. We do need to retreat those trees after we get through that cycle. So really the long-term solution here is what the folks over at the Hemlock Initiative are working on, and those are those biological controls. And those biological controls are being brought over from the West Coast, and they've been approved for release in New York, and they're being released at various locations where they can feed on the hemlock woolly adelgid. I don't know if Carrie has more information she wants to share about that program.
I'd love to. Thank you. Yes, we definitely feel like biological control is the long-term solution. But if you think about the uncountable number of HWA insects that are out there on our landscape, and the fact that a very big release for us is 2,000 insects. First, we have to figure out biological control and make sure that the strategy that we are researching is going to work. And then it's going to take a while for as many as we can release. It'll take a long time for those populations to build up enough to start protecting trees. So the short-term solution is definitely treatment, because right now the biological controls are not going to save your trees. We're hoping they will in the future.
Thanks, Carrie. So I see a question from Dan that says, are there control measures that have been implemented in the southern part of the hemlock range, successes and failures? Tamara, you've actually, I see Carrie's coming off, and Tamara's actually been down in some of these other forests. Do either of you want to tackle that question for us?
So North Carolina is sort of the epicenter of the Tsuga carolinianus range, and they've done a lot of chemical treatments. Their pesticide laws are a little bit different than ours, so they're able to do some more widespread treatments than we have been able to, and they've had great success with the biocontrol. So they do find that there's high mortality of hemlock, and there are also survivors, particularly with a combination of both chemical treatment and biological controls. And Carrie may have some more to add, but there are surviving trees, and there's certainly a lot of hope that some of those surviving trees will have the genetic key in them to resistance for the future.
There's some research being done in the South on silvicultural management practices, but the research is in its very early stages, and there's nothing that we can recommend at this time that would really help our trees. And we'll just have to wait and see how that research turns out.
I think I also want to add on that hopeful note there that the biological controls, once they get established, they do spread. So there's lots of places now through North Carolina that are not at the areas where the biological controls were originally released, but those biological controls are reproducing and moving naturally. And in fact, even in New York State, down in the Shawangunk area at Mohonk Preserve, for instance, they've found some of the biological controls that were released over at Minnewaska State Park. So while the number of new biological controls released from the lab is, not quite as many of us would like to have, they are reproducing in the wild and finding those adelgids.
And for folks who don't know, Tamara is our APIPP program manager. So if you're curious who's answering these questions, that's a brief intro for who Tamara is. And then Dan followed up his question with, perhaps I missed this, but what are the biocontrols? So Carrie, do you want to talk a little bit about what our hairy Larrys are?
Sure, I was just typing an answer, but it would be easier to just talk. Biological control is some sort of organism that will help you manage a pest. And this is a pretty well-established practice in the ornamental industry, and it's been very successful in managing winter moth, among other things. In the hemlock woolly adelgid system, the only available options are predators of HWA. So these are adelgid-eating insects. The ones we're working with are a beetle, Laricobius beetles from the Pacific Northwest mainly, and some flies called silver flies, the larvae of which are ravenous predators of small HWA. So those are the two groups that we're working with.
Thanks, Carrie. We're getting to the end of time, but we can probably take one more question if anyone has any last questions. And if not, we'll pass things over to Sean to wrap things up.
All right. Well, thank you. Just want to give a quick shout out to our partners here and thank all of you for showing up to this webinar. It's very important work, and it's really exciting to know that so many people are going to be out there helping us look for HWA. And some of our partners here that have helped with this effort are the Adirondack Mountain Club, IMAP Invasives, Lake George Land Conservancy, All Sable River Association, New York State Hemlock Initiative, CATS, Champlain Area Trails, and the Capital Region Invasive Species Management. So thank you all for being here today. This webinar will be uploaded to YouTube in the next day or two, and Becca, I believe, will follow up with an email about that.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you all. Have a good day.